Hello, everyone. Today I'm looking at Max Payne. Wow. This game pretty much really holds up. The whole diving in slow motion mechanic, I don't think that's ever going to get old. It is really interesting, though, to see the context of this game and I guess Remedy's history. I really didn't, I mean, I played Alan Wake back in the day and didn't really enjoy it. But then I really fell in love with Control. Control was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. How it combined conspiracy, interpersonal psyche, and government bureaucracy all in one really creative package, along with some sci-fi and horror as well. And I went from there to replaying Alan Wake to get ready for 2, and I haven't played 2 yet. And I realized, oh my god, right, they also made Max Payne. And so Remedy's been this company that I've always, or the studio that I've always kind of sort of known about or seen, but I never really engaged with, I guess you could say. And so Max Payne is one of those games like, oh yeah, everyone knows it's Max Payne. It's whatever. Max Payne is Max Payne. It's kind of iconic in a way. And so, yeah, I mean, the general story around Max Payne is that, his wife and children are killed by, a bunch of junkies. Turns out to be the junkies were from on a certain pharmaceutical or on a certain drug that was actually produced by an official pharmaceutical, and they're pushing that as a street drug to help control the people and also help create profits. And so, even though there are two, unrelated incidents, Max realizes, oh my god, these people are responsible for the death of my wife and children. I'm going to take my full revenge on them. I'm going to go outside the law. Used to be a cop, went to the DEA's office because of what happened to his wife and kids. And now he's essentially gone totally rogue and on a complete killing spree. And so throughout the game, you feed, different mobsters, gangsters, bosses. That leads to a conspiracy all the way to the top of this drug cartel based in New York City. And yeah, I was kind of surprised that there's a pretty large variety of guns in this game. I was used to the iconic dual-wield pistols, the dual Berettas that Max has, but it turns out that later, well, not later, honestly, you have the Desert Eagles, pump-action shotgun, sawed-off shotguns, semi-auto jackhammer, I think, twin Uzis, carbine assault rifle, grenade launcher, grenades, Molotovs, like the whole suite. And it is interesting that this game is published by Rockstar, so there's a lot of things in this game that essentially feel like a lot of GTA. So I mean, Max Payne on its basic premise, it feels like a combination of Grand Theft Auto 3 and I don't know, The Matrix, or like they mentioned John Woo and stuff like that. So I don't know. Overall, I really I think it's a very fun game. I mean, even like the main character Max, even though it's Sam Lake, he looks exactly like Claude from GTA 3, and it's just a more combat focused game rather than exploration or whatever in Grand Theft Auto. And just a different flavor, really. It feels like a different version of GTA 3, honestly. It has the same kind of criminal mob bosses, the seedy underground, but really the way in place that Max Payne really shines through is the writing. The writing is phenomenal. It's done this film noir, hard-boiled detective, poetic justice kind of thing, along with Norse mythology, with things like Ragnarok. And that's because, the developers, Remedy, I believe they're from Finland, I believe. And so that aspect actually finds itself and fills itself into the game, which I found super interesting, that there's a bunch of Norse mythology. So, for example, they talk about Ragnarok, where you have this endless winter and this storm, and you have essentially, this time of complete chaos, essentially, that happens when the two wolves engulf the sun and the moon. And so New York is going through this extreme cold front that it has in its entire history. And so that reflects kind of the Ragnarok that's in the mythological sense. You also have like a character called like Anthony Woden or something who's a senator, and he has like an eye patch or like a fake thing over one of his glasses. And so there's references to all sorts of Norse mythology, along with hard-boiled detective, combined into this GTA style action game, which is really, really crazy. And something I love about the game is that they all have the GoldenEye faces or technology where they just kind of put the textures of someone's real face on the characters. So they look very uncanny. They look very real and very fake at the same time. Where sometimes they'll do like a slow motion thing at the end of a gunfight when you kill the last guy and it'll zoom up like on his face and you'll be kind of see like, oh yeah, that does look like a real person, but in a very uncanny way. That honestly I kind of prefer. It's kind of cool looking. Um, and so yeah, it's the typical, degenerate. We have to take care of the degenerates and the bad guys and whatever. But it's just written in such a poetic way that it makes it super engaging. The other thing that's really cool is that the way it's told is through these comic book style slideshows where it's basically loading these segments where you'll have Max or someone else completely voice acted the entire thing, but it's these really kind of super cheesy screenshots, and they look like photos taken with a real actor and then a filter of Photoshop placed over it to show essentially that it is an abstraction, more or less. It really is a version of, it's a very abstract kind of thing and very kind of artistic in a weird way. Like a lot of the shots of New York City during the winter have this weird effect on them, and it almost looks like a bunch of watercolors, and I really enjoy it. It really sets the tone and the mood for the game. One thing I maybe don't like about the game, which is a little bit odd, is they just give you too much ammo. Honestly, you're going to be using kind of more or less the same weapon the entire game, mostly, as long as you aren't super wasteful with your ammunition. It's very, very difficult to run out of ammo. Speaking of about poetic things, there are also these segments where the main character goes into a dream sequence, and in this dream sequence, he's like haunted by the past where his wife and child were killed, and you actually have a mission where that happens, and it is pretty haunting. It's pretty dark and not very pleasant at all. And it kind of is building up to this point where these thugs have killed your child and your wife in your bed, and you're just coming up there to see it. And it cuts to like the comic book cutscene, and it has, God, his name is Sam Lake or whatever his name is. He goes, no, and it completely, it completely undercuts the tension. It's pretty funny, in my opinion. I just really enjoyed it. Like it was funny, it was silly, but I like how they're trying to do these very dark themes, but because of the limitation of the software, they're not really as dark and as edgy as they could be, which honestly I prefer. From a gameplay perspective, it's just really, really fun to like slow motion dodge at people. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was actually firing. For example, like sometimes I wasn't sure if I'd be firing my bullets in slow motion, and sometimes I wasn't sure if, am I actually firing because they wouldn't be going off, and like, am I lying on the ground, like what's going on? And sometimes it would be a little bit hard to tell. You do have melee weapons in this game, but they're very rarely used, and they're super, super ineffective. Like a baseball bat and a lead pipe. Like they're there, but they really don't, except for certain segments in the story. I guess other things, you go from the streets of New York to, I think the sewers, to a boat in the harbor, to these corporate offices in New York City. And it's very dark, very noir, whatever. I'm roughly reminded of the Max Payne movie, which I really have a poor memory of. I was just trying to watch all the video game movies, and that was just on the list. And all I can remember is I think the movie actually matched the tone of the game, but I have no memory recollection if it was faithful to it anyway. Um, but honestly, it wouldn't be hard to do. It feels like a very American product, more or less. There is, a decent amount of blood and and again, there's really, sorry, I was going to talk about the really interesting dream sequences. There's these really bloody hallways you go through, and they're very abstract, and I really enjoy where you can be, okay, yeah, we're going to be, a guy who is, this punk thug general sort of story, but at the same token, we're going to be very poetic about it in a certain way. We're going to be very nuanced, and it's well written, which is really what I want in a game. I want writing that's really interesting. How it talks about the coldness of the city and how the gun felt like a dead weight in his hand, and it's just written well, and it's really nice and fun to enjoy. Also, I think it's funny that your main source of healing are painkillers, and if your pain gets too great, then you basically die and it's game over. Again, there's some segments here where you have to do non-combat things, and it's super frustrating because this game is really based around like action and combat. Like for example, the dream sequences, they were very frustrating in some of the places because you have to do platforming, and this game is not designed around platform. You can jump, but it's very clanky. It's very weird, essentially. But yeah, it was also a pretty short game. It had 3 acts and 6 kind of chapters per act. It took me about a day and a half to beat, and it's like, yeah, okay, that was a pretty decent, cool experience. Nothing super blow me away or super interesting. I was just like, okay, yeah, no, that's like Grand Theft Auto if it was more actiony, I guess. Yeah, so it's overall it's a pretty decent, pretty good game. Still it still holds up, honestly. You can still play it, but from a story perspective or whatever, it's still kind of it's a pretty okay story, but it's done well. And I really honestly like the comic strips simply because in the later games they obviously updated to like in cutscene graphics and whatever, but there's something very charming and very very much broken about the true crime, kind of cutscenes where they're trying to be super serious when it's obviously actors taking with like a weird filter or whatever. Anyway, there's a bit of soul here, and it's worth playing, I guess. Nothing amazing, but it was decent, and I'm happy I played it. So yeah, that's it. Max Payne. Cool. See you guys later.